You're listening to The World at 8 with Lynn Mozart. The World at 8, the number one in nationalist news.
Highlights of the news today, Wednesday, the 6th of November 2013. How do I claim benefits when I get to Britain? Judge admits he is powerless to quash marriage of a British Muslim girl who was taken to Pakistan and forced to wed at gunpoint aged 14. 1,775 jobs to be axed at Britain's last remaining shipyards. Greece, vehicle owners stung with a luxury tax. Dutch refugee evictions under fire from Council of Europe. Sweden, Halal meat sparks threats and complaints. China's Communist Party, HQ hit by a series of explosions. The toxic monster is coming. Thought for the day, 2014, thousands of jobs but millions of immigrants. And finally, Satanas or what? UK news. How do I claim benefits when I get to Britain? Romanians demand help from job agencies in the UK. As Romanian and Bulgarian residents will be eligible to receive certain UK benefits in January, job agencies are said to be inundated with requests from foreigners about how to claim what they are entitled to. Judge admits he is powerless to quash marriage of a British Muslim girl who was taken to Pakistan and forced to wed at gunpoint, aged 14. Mr Justice Holman ruled that, although the girl was under extreme duress and aged under 16 at the time, he was barred by statute from voiding the marriage. He says he cannot nullify the marriage of a teenage mother who says she was forced at gunpoint into becoming a bride when she was just 14 years old. Instead, the girl, now 17 and a mother of a 1-year-old, must defy her family if she wants the union formally annulled, said Mr Justice Holman at the High Court. The teenager, who was born in Britain and whose family has lived here for 40 years, says she was shipped out to Pakistan to contract a forced marriage with the 24-year-old man 2 years ago. She told how she was subjected to harrowing violence and menaced with a gun to go through with the ceremony, and was 2 weeks later forced to have sex with her husband, giving birth to his baby, who is now aged just over 1. After she came forward with her account, her local authority took both her and her baby into care and asked Mr Justice Holman to formally declare that her marriage, which effectively made her a rape victim, could never have been recognised under English law. However, he said he was prevented from making a solemn declaration to that effect by a section of the Family Law Act 1986 which states, "No declaration may be made by any court that a marriage was at its inception void." World at 8 says, "I'm not sorry for this girl or the others. Their families have slid through the cracks in British society for several decades, like the slugs they are, but still not integrated at all. Thousands of girls have been shipped off to marry guys in Pakistan, and usually it's taken that these same men will come over to the UK and live. It is a well-known means of increasing Pakistani Muslims' property and status over here and outbreeding us. What I find offensive is the fact she thinks she can get an English judge to overrule what is in the Koran and what is part of their culture. We allowed them in to stay and live with their traditions, so they must abide by them as well. I have no sympathy for people who want to make the most of two different worlds when it suits them." 1,775 jobs to be axed at Britain's last remaining shipyards. Defence giant BAE Systems is to axe 1,775 jobs across its naval ships business and end shipbuilding at one of the country's most historic yards. There is no doubt that this is a devastating day for the UK shipbuilding industry, says David Hulse of the Daily Express. The firm said 940 jobs will be lost in Portsmouth on the south coast and a further 835 in Glasgow, Rosyth and Filton near Bristol. The move will end 5 centuries of naval shipbuilding at Portsmouth, the home of Lord Nelson's ship the HMS Victory and the birthplace of the Royal Navy. Shipbuilding operations will end in Portsmouth in the second half of next year, but an engineering team will be retained to support the new Type 26 warships, which will be built in Glasgow. European news. Greece, vehicle owners stung with luxury tax. Thousands of vehicle owners in Greece will be stung twice this year after an implementation of the luxury tax comes into effect for vehicles with a 1.929cc engine or larger and up to 10 years of age, as daily to Vima Online reports. Of the 5.5 million car and motorcycle owners, about 500,000 will be called to pay a 5% to 10% extra tax on the value of their vehicle, depending on engine size and vehicle age. By taking into consideration that the domestic market has nearly collapsed, the extra taxes could likely be the straw that breaks the camel's back. Dutch refugee evictions under fire from Council of Europe. The Netherlands must continue to provide failed asylum seekers with food, clothing and a roof over their heads, the Council of Europe's Social Rights Committee said in a preliminary ruling on Thursday. This means the Netherlands may not evict anyone who has failed to win refugee status from a refugee centre or other accommodation, pending a final ruling, NOS Television said. The Dutch Protestant Church made a formal complaint to the Council in February, arguing that the Justice Ministry's policy contravenes the European Social Charter. The Netherlands has a policy of evicting failed asylum seekers from refugee centres if they refuse to cooperate with their deportation. World at 8, and that doesn't suit the EU, does it? A country handling its own problems firmly. Sweden, halal meat sparks threats and complaints. Authorities in Svedala, a county in southwest Sweden, have received numerous threats and complaints after it was learnt the county has bought halal meat since 2009, Swedish radio news reports. Many residents expressed their outrage via emails using coarse language, racial slurs or veiled threats. Why should our children and grandchildren eat this food? Send those who eat halal meat home instead and let our kids eat real food, read one letter. World at 8, quite right. Why should Europeans be forced to eat this cruel harvest, which is against all Christian principles? The Jews have never forced kosher on the Shiksa population, so why allow these Muslims to do so? World news. China's Communist Party HQ hit by a series of explosions. Witnesses say between 4 and 7 explosions were heard outside a key government installation in Shanxi province on Wednesday morning, causing at least 1 death and 8 injuries. A series of apparently coordinated explosions have gone off outside a Communist Party headquarters in wealthy industrial hub in northern China. Media reports claim that the improvised explosive devices, packed with metal ball bearings and nails and concealed in roadside flower beds, were detonated at around 7:40 a.m. in Taiwan, the capital of coal-rich Shanxi province. The explosions took place outside the headquarters of the Shanxi Provincial Committee of the Communist Party on Yinsei Street, one of the city's main boulevards, news agency Xinhua reported. The street is also home to Taiwan's railway station and a number of its best hotels. The CCTV television network said at least 20 vehicles have been damaged. World at 8. Not all is right in China, and all the allowed reportings are a cover-up. With this new middle-class rich emerging and the Chinese world getting smaller, these people who have lived under successive strict regimes are rebelling and wanting the golden dragon that the West offers, freedom. Of course you and I know that freedom is hard won and even harder to keep, but the Chinese peasantry don't know that. It is still a closed country. The toxic monster is coming. Texas-sized floating island containing 1 million tonnes of junk from Japan, Tsunami, is drifting towards the US. The most concentrated stretch of rubbish, dubbed the toxic monster, is currently sitting between Hawaii and California. An enormous floating island of debris from Japan's 2011 tsunami is drifting towards the coast of America, bringing with it over 1 million tonnes of junk that would cover an area the size of Texas. The most concentrated stretch, dubbed the toxic monster by Fox News, is currently around 1,700 miles off the coast, sitting between Hawaii and California, but several million tonnes of additional debris remain scattered across the Pacific. Thought for the day, 2014. Thousands of jobs, but millions of migrants. We should be a happy country. In fact, we should all be dancing in the streets with sheer joy. According to the powers that be, have been and will be, we are a nation of multicultural dreamers, all in high-powered jobs, all with very good pensions, all looked after superbly in an absolutely free healthcare system, our children are very well educated, yet free again, our large houses are enabled with Help to Buy, heavily subsidised mortgages, many repayable by our local councils as a form of Sharia rent if we should get into difficulties. Our local constabulary come at every shadow we see or word we hear that isn't quite to our liking, and we can carry on all the habits, both good and bad, that we have evolved over many years, and yada and more yada. If you're singing this song whilst wending your way home from a job in a nice new car, you probably ain't English, or your parents weren't, and that is what is wrong with this country. It is, to all intents and purposes, not our country anymore. Regarding the English work ethic, what surprises me most is the attitude many of our own people have towards their own countrymen or fellow tribespeople, to be non-PC about it, and work. The work ethic has changed so much in the post-war years as to be unrecognisable to many who have lived through it. I have said my piece about the robotism of the Western world, so we'll try not to go there again. But suffice to say, computers have put thousands and thousands of white and blue collar workers literally out of the workplace for many years, and it is still going on, in the form of small and large shops competing with the shopping online brigade. It stands to reason that if a small shop contains 6 persons and they cannot go online for various reasons, the first of which is money and packing facilities, you lose 6 jobs when that shop closes. If it goes online, you might save 3. Put these numbers into the huge general department stores or even large local shops and put in the takeover factor or merging of several large chains together, and you have a whirlwind of unemployment, even if you do go online. Let's get it straight. Online usually means, in this country, several chain stores linked together under one title, a tacky warehouse, a few immigrant staff packing and sorting, and a small number of immigrant computer sales staff as well. Compared to a fully staffed large store, the numbers simply do not match up. Put that with the great British modern ethos of simply not moving around, and the masses who have just discovered buying without moving at all, and you can see what is happening. Of course the government is delighted. We live in a Marxist society, and it gives them a reason to bring in yet more migrants to work in these jobs and outbreed us to an even larger extent. What has changed is us as well. In days of old, and I can only speak for the southern regions, not the north, most men of working age worked. That is what they did. The then ascending middle classes all left home the same time, went to their local train stations, got in and went to London, worked all day, went home on the evening trains. They went home to women who often, if not professional, didn't work. They were at home with the children. They didn't do creches and care centres for babies then, and children didn't start school until they did kindergarten at 5. The whole work ethic was ingrained in the suburbs in the south, and now, along with the rest of the country, it's vanished. First, in the 50s, we took the lead from the States with their vast advertising and propaganda of a brave new world. Then computers came along, desk sharing, and finally few jobs that didn't entail some computer knowledge, and then no jobs at all if you were white and over 45. Women have been encouraged to a huge extent to have a career, many actually doing jobs a man over 40 would have been doing, but is wanted no longer. Thus the whole working UK ethos has changed, and not for the better. I have no problem with women working. Hell, I've had to work most of my life unwillingly, and even now I'm working hard, but willingly. But to encourage all women to work all their lives and discourage men to work is an unbalanced and clearly wrong way to maintain the Christian view of family and in any sense of purpose for our young white males. I'm shocked that even my dearest Liberal friend is almost anti-British. She voiced an opinion to me that is a personal opinion, but I found it shared by hundreds if not thousands of our own people, and this is what we are fighting. Our own people, in many instances. Who are the people we want to save? I was told that in essence, the young Brits don't want to work. They've been spoilt and pampered with an education system dumbed down for them to make them look better, and many are not fit for purpose. Which is why we need young immigrants to do the jobs the Brits won't do. Now, in essence, she has a point. We, like every other country in the world, have our unworkables. They either cannot do a job, cannot pass an interview, don't want to go home and spliff out and chill, forget the world completely, come from a family who have never really worked in an office or anywhere at all, and just go down to the pub, or are simply not fit in any way to hold any position. We all have them. The only difference is that we have to put up with ours whilst other countries send theirs over here. I can understand the thinking behind the fact that many of our kids have suffered from the blighted educational system in the UK, made in the UK for foreigners in mind. There are no apprenticeships anymore, our armed forces are dwindling, our farmers and fishermen are doing the same, and sons that would have followed in a family tradition have no tradition to follow in. Polytechnics and grammar schools, which used to be the backbone of Middle England, are non-existent, and the thought process that goes with them has gone as well. Of course, under these circumstances, the stage is set for a large proportion of foreign workers to come in and work and then hopefully leave, but of course they don't leave. Why? Because of everything the EU promises and we Brits deliver. On a personal note, I can understand some disheartened employers who don't receive any English comers to interviews, but in most cases many of these jobs are advertised abroad before the UK, in specific countries, with specific agencies and for specific language speakers. So why expect a white, middle-aged, experienced Brit to apply? For example, why are certain jobs advertised for Polish speakers only? They won't be working in Poland, will they? No. It's because the British employer will only employ workers who can communicate with the other workers he employs for the minimum wage. In fact, having millions of immigrant workers over here has, in the last few years, made working conditions worse for us English and early migrant British, not better, but certainly more profitable for the employers. It's this attitude from the public and media of the work-shy and undereducated English youth that pervades any discussion on the pros and cons of the desire to get as many foreign bodies over here as possible. Like racism, the comeback is on the self-degradation of our own youth. Now, when you have an educational system in place that worships diversity at its own multicoloured altar above that of the traditional English values, then, like Pol Pot's re-education pits, you are making an almost subhuman level of society who will not be fit for purpose, thus paving the way for a new level to come in and take prime jobs, and they will not be English, but many will be homegrown foreigners as well as the expense of bussing them in. To all intents and purposes, if we had limited immigration for 50 years and a full job market, a good economy and a better sense of self-preservation from our various governments, there would be no harm at all in having a small foreign workforce in this country. In fact, it has always been said that, after the last war, that a country should be open to a limited amount of professional and semi-professional foreign workers, and in the past it was generally so. It's only since the gold rush of ex-Commonwealth immigrants and the inception of the EU with their multicoloured vision of Europe that we have, in all senses, taken in all and sundry for the last 50 years. People who don't want to work in their own countries, people whose countries have been made uninhabitable by them, their religion, or, in Europe, the adoption of the euro. People who cannot work because they're too ill or too disabled. People who will only work over here because, however low the pay is, it is better than in their own country. People who hate us but who just want to cash in on the British benefit system, which shows no signs of being modified for foreigners, despite the many cuts and slashes we Brits have to put up with. It is never, ever because they want to improve our way of life or adopt the English or British ethos or our traditions. So in truth, the mantras of lazy Brits is for the most part untrue. Most of our youth want to work, most wish they'd worked harder at school, and many wish they had a second chance. Which, if they'd been living in the 60s, they would have had, but not in this culture. We are partly to blame for it. We have allowed our kids to be brainwashed into thinking unless they go to a second-rate university, they'll be fit for nothing. And as we've done away with any choice nowadays and are busy bringing in more so-called foreign workers, what chance do they stand? Let alone a white male over 45, even highly qualified, which is viewed nowadays as overqualified. But the employers will still accept a highly qualified Pole who is a few years younger. When we finish digging our graves for employment in general, the EU will start up again in their relentless attack on our traditions and economy by massive unchecked immigration into this country under the guise of workers. Even some African helped off the boat in Lampedusa stated he wanted to go to London, and I almost cried with sheer fury. It wasn't because he was a black African, but because he couldn't speak English properly, was not educated, let alone a brain surgeon, and what good would he and the many thousands like him do in the UK? Answer: none. He would breed and receive financial benefits for doing so, and that is all. He might even contribute towards our cache of foreign rapists and criminals whom we can never, ever, apparently, deport. We have the wonders of the Romanians and Bulgarians next year, and we are advertising jobs in those countries. Why isn't our government forcing these agencies and employers to employ British, English, white males and females? Why is it more racist to employ your own in preference to foreigners? Why not make some guidelines before it is too late? London, our capital city, is a photographic evidence of how a large city can be completely rearranged and re-ethnicised through immigration and employment. The official figures for employment are never sorted in what ethnicity they are, and it would be interesting also to know what ages that involves. My husband, overqualified and white American, hasn't worked for 5 years despite thousands of applications, and due to age isn't on the job seekers stats, although actively still seeking a job. There are thousands like him, more mature guys and girls, who do not make the stats, but they are jobless, and moreover their old jobs are likely being done by Indian or Pakistani ex-students straight out of our universities. Lower paid and part-time jobs, while suiting youngsters, will not consider these lost workers because they are now too old and overqualified. All this working until 70 is fine if you can find a job. So in a nutshell, massive immigration into this country, which is still being encouraged under a different title of Jobs for Foreigners Apply England, a second-rate education system for our own, and propaganda that white youth doesn't work, has all set the stage for this sorry state of affairs. And believe me, the EU is now mainly to blame. We must leave it before our country is totally unrecognisable. There is a quote from a think tank who want to leave the EU, and with regard to the Czechs, check it out. Former PM and President of Czech Republic, Václav Klaus, is already known as the trenchant critic of the EU. He caused considerable irritation to Brussels by holding up ratification of the Lisbon Treaty as long as he could, for example. Still, he was taking no prisoners at his recent book launch. Mr Klaus's reported views on what would happen if the Czechs left the EU. Absolutely nothing. Spot on, sir. Warming to his theme, he continued, "The whole of Europe will leave the EU sooner or later, and it will leave Barroso and Rompuy sitting alone in Brussels. We could have a race, last one out has to pay Lord Kinnock's pension." So the truth at last, a lump of Labour peers cashing in as usual, remember Blair. We also have wonderful news on the UK job front that to employ a Muslim is a waste of time and energy. Why? Because sooner or later they will sue any employer who objects to the praying to Mecca 5 times a working day, no official prayer room and wearing dustbin liners so no one knows who they are. So even with those facts, it makes the awful Eastern European workers with their drugs, sex trafficking, usually filthy living habits and gangmasters look quite good, doesn't it? And finally, Satanas what? This is courtesy of Urso from Brazil. A few minutes before the church service started, the congregation was sitting in their pews talking. Suddenly Satan appeared at the front of the church. Everyone started screaming and running for the entrance, trampling each other in a frantic effort to get away from evil incarnate. Soon the church was empty except for one elderly gentleman who sat calmly in his pew without moving, seemingly oblivious to the fact that God's ultimate enemy was in his presence. So Satan walked up to the man and said, "Do you know who I am?" The man replied, "Yup, sure do." "Aren't you afraid of me?" Satan asked. "Nope, sure ain't," said the man. "Don't you realise I can kill you with one word?" asked Satan. "Don't doubt it for a minute," returned the old man in an even tone. "Did you know I can cause you profound, horrifying agony for all eternity?" persisted Satan. "Yup," was the calm reply. "And you're still not afraid?" asked Satan. "Nope," said the old man. More than a little perturbed, Satan asked, "Why aren't you afraid of me?" The man calmly replied, "Been married to your sister for 62 years. You've been listening to The World at 8. I am Lynn Mozar and I wish you all a very good night.